being angry. Like a lot of people become leaders because they're angry about something. Maybe something really unjust happened to them and they're pissed. And so they were going to go start a movement. The feminist movement, for example, was a lot fueled by anger.
Today's guest is Christine Hassler. She is a master coach, facilitator, and speaker with over 15 years of experience. She is the best-selling author of 3 books, the host of the top-rated podcast Overeat and On With It, and the co-founder of the Elementum Coaching Institute. Within this episode, we dive into many really powerful topics, from how to lead in these times of division to why doing the inner child healing is so important, especially for those wanting to support and lead others. And we also go into the number one thing that expanded her career success and can do the same for you: how to differentiate between standards and expectations and heal our expectation hangover, and the gifts and challenges of being in a sacred union relationship with someone that is also deeply in the work and deeply committed to his mission. I have no doubt that you will get really valuable golden nuggets from this episode. I'm excited to share it with you. Keep on watching as we dive right into it. Christine, thank you so much for making the time to be here in Sacred Leaders. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. I want to get right into it. When it comes to leadership, one thing that I see happens a lot, and I was actually having this conversation yesterday, is that there is a tendency to look at the light, amazing, novel, awesome aspects of why we want to do what we do, the service, the impact, the wanting to help. And sometimes we can bypass the shadow aspects of why we do what we do, wanting to seek for approval, for validation, for confirmation, all of the things. And I know you do a lot of work with inner child healing. You and your husband run different workshops, and I've been following your work in that way. And I'm curious to know, from your perspective, how does that inner child healing impact your leadership?
Oh my gosh. In so many ways, in all the ways. So did you and Steph talk about what the inner child is? Did you cover that with him?
We didn't go too deep into that. Yes,
Okay.
let's start there for sure.
So I'll start there. The inner child is a psychological reality. It's a piece of us that we always have, no matter how old we are. It's not, people hear inner child and they think it's a weird hippy dippy woo woo thing. And it's not. It's actually, it's something that therapists, psychologists really acknowledge as a part of us. So if we think about, as children, we're basically unprogrammed computers. We're just a blank board. And everything that happens between what we're told, what happens to us, what we see, what we observe, what we make meaning of, gets programmed. And so much of how we are as adults is impacted by what happened to us as children. Simple example: if you had a lot of rejection as a kid, maybe you were teased, maybe you never got, the teachers didn't like you, those kinds of things, you're going to have rejection issues in your leadership. You're going to be afraid sometimes to post that blog or make that statement or put yourself out there or really start your business or take your business to the next level because you're afraid of rejection. And that's not because your adult self is afraid of rejection. It's because you've got a wounded little inner child in there. So that inner child issue of rejection is going to impact how you lead. Another example, let's say that you always wanted your father to be proud of you, or any parent, but a lot of times we want dad to be proud of us. Our leadership will be influenced by our ego. We'll want to get to that next thing, get to that next level, get to that next accomplishment, because we're constantly searching for that validation, that am I enough now? Have I made it? And so it's really important to me, and when I coach leaders, we don't want wounded leaders. Yes. We don't want leaders, and we're seeing that especially in America right now with this election. we don't see healthy leaders. We're seeing wounded leaders, leaders that are leading for power more than for the collective good. And so that kind of being able to heal our issues so that we're really leading from a place of inspiration and from love versus from needing validation, being afraid of rejection, wanting to finally feel like we're somebody, being angry. Like a lot of people become leaders because they're angry about something. Maybe something really unjust happened to them and they're pissed. And so they were going to go start a movement. The feminist movement, for example, was a lot fueled by anger. And thank God we had the feminist movement, especially as a woman. We stand on their shoulders in so many ways.
Yeah.
And there was a shadow side to that movement, anger. But we needed that anger to get it going. Like that kind of leadership needed to be there because it was such a big mountain to overcome that anger was that fuel. But now, especially as feminine leaders, we need not to come from anger anymore because all that does is create more division.
Yes.
We don't want to move women forward by being angry at men. We want to move people forward by realizing that we're all one and that the feminine has amazing qualities and so does the masculine. And what we're really fighting against is the shadow aspect of any masculine or feminine.
Yeah.
So the thing that I think has driven my success as a business person, entrepreneur, and specifically a leader is that I've always put my own work first. I've always made my own inner work. People say, what's the best course you've done for your business? Or how do you do your planning? And I don't do any of that. I work on cleaning up my inner stuff. And anytime I heal an issue from my past, I see my business change. Yes. And that helps me lead because I'm not coming from trying to compensate. And one of my massive wounds was rejection and was feeling like I didn't belong and was feeling like I wasn't enough. So I was very addicted to accomplishing. And then leading became more about me than it was the people I was leading. It became more about like, what can I achieve versus who am I actually helping and serving? And now that I've cleaned that up, I'm able to lead from a place of what's the vision that I want to point people to? How do I really want to empower people? Because I'm no longer coming from a disempowered place. Reggie, hold on one second. What are you doing? Are you eating my rug? Can you give me one quick second? Let me give him a bone. 1 second.
Okay, yeah, awesome. And when you were talking about that, what got me thinking is I see this in a lot of leaders and a lot of my clients that there is this shadow aspect that plays out because until we own it, until we know that it's there, until we can see it and recognize it and work on it at home as our homework, it shows up in our leadership, right? It shows up in the way we show up with our clients, how we show up on social media, the energy that's driving the things that we do, for sure. And one thing I see often as well is that some people within this industry, or I would say a lot of people, are, as I said earlier, bypassing that because of a lack of awareness in regards to where they're at truly. So some people will do a couple of personal development courses or plant medicine ceremony and think this is it, I'm done. And now I'm all about the service and all about the impact. And I have found even people in my inner circle that I've been able to see, and I've seen this in myself as well in the past, where sometimes we do think that we are doing it for the service and all the noble causes, and we can be not really looking into what's underneath for us. So I guess I'm curious to hear, what would you say is one way to self-assess right now for anyone listening to this, that they might be thinking, I'm all about the service, I'm on purpose, I'm doing it just for these reasons. How can we self-assess to really see if there's still an aspect of our shadow that we get to work on?
For the best way, from my point of view, is to really assess your level of attachment. The more you want it, the more you're in your ego. So if you're like, I'm going to serve, I wake up every day, like committed, and you're really attached, I'm going to impact 1 million people by the time I'm 30 or whatever we put on it, that's attachment.
Yeah.
You know that you're in a healthy place if you're like, if I impact one person, I've done my job.
Yeah.
if that one person is myself, if I've changed my life, then I'm an effective leader because I've led myself through something, over something.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a massive attachment to your vision, how big you want it to be, I'd encourage you to look at that. Now, that doesn't mean you don't have intentions. That doesn't mean you don't have vision. That doesn't mean you don't have commitment. But I have seen so many, and I've been in this business since 2004.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've seen a lot of life coach. I've seen a lot of mission-driven entrepreneurs. And I can tell the difference between someone who's really in it for the people and someone who's really in it for themselves, thinking they're doing it for the people.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean you can't have a big following and all those things. But I look at somebody like Brene Brown, for example, who I think is very mission-driven.
Yeah.
You know, she wasn't famous until her 40s. She just does the work. And what's made her well known is her work is really good.
Yeah.
Like her work is really good. It's not her marketing campaigns. It's not like we heard of Brene Brown because some great marketing campaign came toward us. I mean, I hope most people listening have heard of Brene Brown. You've heard of Brene Brown,
Yes.
correct?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
I love her.
Or because she was like, you know, on social media, or she was doing all the Instagram graphics.
Yeah. Yeah.
We know of her because she's done great freaking work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the difference. And that's always been my compass is, yes, I have intention. Yes, I have vision, but I'm also open to how the universe wants to use me. Because the more attached I am to how big my following is, or my numbers, or how many people know me, or whatever, the more I'm driving, the more I'm dictating how I want to be a leader versus doing my own inner work, making that commitment to serve and go, okay, universe, where do you want to place me? Because it's sort of like if you have a football team. I live in Texas. I grew up in Texas. So I'm going to use a football analogy. If you have a football team, American football, not soccer, if every player wants to be the quarterback, there's no team. But everybody wants to be the quarterback because that's like the star. But the coach has to decide, no, you're better as a linebacker. You're better as a running back. You know, you're better on defense, and places people where they can best thrive and where the team can best succeed. And I think as leaders, that's important, is not to be like, well, I want to be the quarterback or whatever that means to you, and really go, here's my intentions. Here's what I love. Here's what I'm good at. Here's what I'm working on inside myself and what makes me uniquely equipped to serve people who may be going through the same. And then there's a level of surrender to, okay, universe, where do you want to use me?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. And I was just reflecting back at how that showed up for me in my path as well. The more comfortable I felt within myself, the safest I felt, and like really connected to my purpose, which was always there. But the more work I did within myself, it actually became harder in a way for me to have this 10-year vision, this super strong goal. And I remember talking to our common friend Alexi actually about it when I was like, I just don't find that drive of I want that many followers or I want to make that much money. It's just not there. However, the success kept on happening and money kept on growing and clients kept on coming and the future opportunities kept on growing because you need it.
This is so embarrassing. Like, can you give me a second? I just have to let him out. So sorry.
So that happened where my attachment or my desire to make X amount of money or have X amount of clients jumping in my group program or my course or things like that, like all of that really disappeared. And there was a time where I actually freaked out a little bit about it because I was like, well, can this work if I'm not attached to it? I truly don't care. And I remember speaking to some of my friends and going, I just love my life as it is. If I just help a couple people, I'm happy already. I'm happy to just help the one friend or help the one client. I don't really have that. What I found is that the more I focused on that intention within, things kept on working. And there was not that, that happened to me as well, that I realized that the more I focused within myself and did my own inner work, that attachment to how many clients I would have, how much money I would make, really left and disappeared. And I was actually speaking to our common friend Alexi just recently about that, where I was like, it's just, I don't have that drive of that. I need to make that much money, or I need to be seen in that many platforms, or I need to grow my social media to that many numbers. It's like, truly, do you not care? And then there is this, obviously, this part of me that wants to serve and wants to support as many people as possible, but it comes from a really different energy, very different. There's different energetics running the show. In saying that, one thing that you mentioned earlier as well, you touched on the leadership, especially within the US, but just globally, the leadership that we are seeing and how things are showing up. And I would love to hear your perspective on how we get to lead in this time of division within this current climate. How do we step up as leaders in this time?
It's such a great question. And I think that it's a simple and complex answer. So, can we lead without being triggered? You know, I've seen so many people that I've really respected and looked up to over the years be massively triggered and massively angry and pick a side and just sort of create more division.
Yes.
And try to lead people to what they think is right.
Mm-hmm.
I want to lead people to what, and the puppy agrees, who's currently chasing his tail, so textbook. I want to lead people to what they know as their truth, not my truth, not what I believe is right. I mean, my biggest thing has been I've wanted people to think for themselves and to question the narrative that they're buying into and recognize their sovereignty. Sovereignty isn't selfishness. Sovereignty isn't narcissism. Sovereignty isn't, well, I'm just a sovereign being and I don't care about my fellow human. No. Actually, the more sovereign we are, the more inspired we feel to help other people realize their own freedom and their own sovereignty. So I think in this time when there's so much division and opinions and this side and that side, leading people from a place of neutrality. We can be passionate. We can be passionate about wanting to have a different world where there's not so much division and we're out of this 3D reality and we're not living from fear and programmed by fear and just allowing an institution, a person or whatever to tell us who we are and what to be afraid of. And so that kind of leadership where because I've definitely been triggered by stuff that's going on. And I make sure that when I get on to speak or host a podcast or talk, I have cleaned that up in my bedroom with my journal and my pillow and beater tube and my sage and my own coaches and people so that when I come to speak, I'm not charged. Yeah. And I think a lot of leaders end up using their platform as their journal. And from my point of view, that's not leadership at all. That's performanceship. That's dictatorship is too strong of a word, but it's manipulation. It's not true leadership. True leaders lead people to their own answers, not the answers that the leader wants them to find.
Yes.
And so it's more important than ever for leaders to do their work. And, I've been kind of quiet about a lot of the things that have been going on because it's not my area of expertise. My area of expertise is helping people with their inner child wounding, helping people be heart-centered entrepreneurs, helping people deal with their triggers. And so since COVID hit, I have been very much sharing about do your inner work because we're in a massive time of uncertainty and division, and your inner child's going to be triggered. Because anytime there's chaos, anytime there's uncertainty, that inner child, that younger part of us, massively is like, it will act out. And so do the inner work, do what you can to shift consciousness. That doesn't mean you're not connected to what needs to go on in your community, to other people, but how can you do it? Like one thing that I did was I gave out $500 grants, and I still have more to give out to people. People had to apply, and it was for therapy, mental health coaching, anything that was like emotional or mental related, because I knew how triggered people really were. And I was like, that's the best way I can lead. I could give money to an organization where I don't really know where it's going to go, or I can really empower people to get their own help. and then I also did a free call for everyone that applied. So get creative in how you want to lead, really get creative, and think about like, how can you help uniquely? Because I think sometimes we want to save the world, and it's like, how can you uniquely help the people that you're here to help, you know?
Yes, definitely. And in that as well, I think it's really important to stop outsourcing that sense of truth that we do
Yep.
that so often. We outsource the truth. So we look at what other people is saying that's happening, what other people are saying we should be feeling, what other people are saying we should be thinking. And I've definitely seen a lot of that even within the coaching community, where there's been a lot of leaders that have used their platforms to almost shame others and convince others of what they need to think and what's the narrative that they should be thinking. So that, I guess, comes back to that clean leadership of really doing your inner work at home, so that that's not transpiring in the work that you do with others. That's something that,
Absolutely, because it's gonna leak over. Like, if you're not doing your inner work, it's gonna leak over, and that's, people trust leaders, and that's how
yes.
we manipulate people, and sometimes can hurt people. And,
Mhm.
I'm sure that I've done it unconsciously in the 16 years that I've been able to hold a leadership position where people have really trusted me, and I just become more and more mindful of it. Of, okay, people trust me, people, may look up to me in some degree,
Yeah.
so I always want to direct them back to themselves the best I can.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that this is one of, out of all the lessons that I've seen 2020 teaches. And I know that it's been very unique for every person, but I think the one thing that I see we are all being really invited to is to find the places where we are still outsourcing that sense of power and looking to what X person is saying, what X person is recommending, what looking for permission outside of ourselves, and really tuning into that sense of inner compass, so that we can
Yes.
know what is really going on, as you said, like without needing to be an expert on what's happening, but really getting to trust ourselves. And that's really, this time I feel like has revealed a lot, in terms of leadership especially, who's in it for the service and who's really deep within the work within themselves, and
Mhm.
who is in that more performative and maybe
Mhm.
undealt with control issues or power
Yes.
issues of leadership, for
Ego
sure.
issues, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
One thing that I've seen and noticed in your work as well is that, for what I've seen, I have the sense that you are someone that's spiritually connected. You have a practice, you know yourself, and you're tuned into something that's bigger than yourself. Whether that is however you call that and however you go about that, I know that it's very unique to each person. But I always feel really inspired by people that seem to get it, and yet they're really grounded in this world. So I would love to hear more about what's your practice, what's your sense of connection with something bigger than yourself, and how do you weave that into your work while remaining really grounded in what you do.
So a lot of my spiritual practice has been actually doing my own work. I find that doing my inner work, the self-reflection, the journaling, the navigating triggers, like when I get triggered, dissecting it and really looking into what's triggering me, has been part of my spiritual path. Because when I do that, I'm lighter, I get to more forgiveness, and that naturally elevates me and connects me to something bigger. Meditation is a big part of it too. Guided visualizations is a big part of it. I really enjoy breath work. My husband's a breath work facilitator, so I really enjoy breath work. Nature is really huge for me. And, finding my spiritual path and practice wasn't always easy, because I can relate to people that live in their head, like who are big thinkers and say, well, I can't meditate because I can't stop thinking. I have a very active mind, a very active mind. It's hard to tune it down. So I have found that sitting and just trying to meditate is sometimes hard for me, but being in nature, listening to certain music, things that are a little bit more active sometimes connect me to spirituality, that feeling of feeling just unconditional love and connection, even more. So it's been, I haven't followed one teacher or one practice. It's evolved over time. Like I
Mhm.
recently, probably a year ago, really got into the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza. and really love that as well. So it's been like different things at different times. There was a time I was really into like goddesses and the feminine archetype and all of that when I was really deepening in my femininity and calling my husband. And so I think that the great thing about our spiritual path is that we don't have to pick one thing and just stick to it. We can if we like that, but it's really finding the thing that is calling you now and the thing that really resonates with you now.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of picking the thing that's going to support your next level of evolution. And once you get there, sometimes you need something completely different.
Exactly.
For sure. Yes. You just said calling in your husband. So let's go there. I had a question earlier. Knowing that you and your husband both do relationship, love, and sex work together and different things like that, I imagine, and I know from my personal experience as well, that it's very different being in a relationship before we've done the work and we know ourselves and we've gone deep, and also being in a relationship with someone that isn't in the work, and then being in a conscious relationship with someone that can not only see themselves, but they can see you and hold a really strong mirror for you as well. So in my experience, you're really required to level up in a way that at times is really epic and at times is really uncomfortable and really challenging. So I would love to hear how this has been for you. What are some of the differences in the epicness and in the challenges that you've noticed between maybe past relationships with people that weren't as self-aware and hadn't done as much work, and the version of yourself that you are now and the husband that you are with now?
Well, I'll start with the challenges. So, a big challenge was coming into the relationship a little spiritually, personal development, arrogant. Both of us being coaches and doing the work for so long, being like, oh, we're conscious. This is sacred union. This is going to be so easy. No. Our inner child wounding came up, stuff came up. But the difference between past relationships, because I've been married before, is I had a partner who, we both came into the relationship with like carry-on baggage, not like cargo checked baggage, like tons of stuff. But we both still came with stuff. And any relationship, no matter how much work you've done, is going to have that. But the difference was with Steph, I had a very willing partner. And I think it's exceptional to find a man, especially, not demoting men in any way, but I think that it's been more acceptable for women to work on ourselves and do things like therapy and personal development, and kind of comes more naturally to women. So men, especially masculine men like Steph is, to find a man who'd done a great deal of work on himself. It took me a while. This is actually the subject of my next book. And the biggest challenge was putting our egos aside and putting everything we knew aside, and being like, even if combined we have 30 years of studying and being quote unquote experts in personal development, we are still new in a relationship. We are new in this relationship. So we had to put everything we knew aside and go, all right, we may need coaching on this relationship. We need to learn things, because even though we're coming in with our knowledge, we need to learn things. Yes. And one thing that was particularly challenging for me is I wanted a masculine man. A lot of times people would say to me, because I was very successful, and from my point of view, like I felt very successful, and I kept that going with a lot of masculine energy, with running a business and traveling all over the world and having people that worked with me and for me. And I adapted to a more masculine world by being more masculine. And when Steph came into my life, it was like we were battling, his masculine and my masculine, because I think that man's greatest fear is losing his freedom. And women, especially mission-driven entrepreneur women, our greatest fear is losing our power. And a lot of us think it's a demotion to step into our feminine. And so there's a part of me that was gripping, like, if I move into my feminine and let his masculine really lead, what's going to happen to my business? Like, what's going to happen to my mission? And what I have learned is that I have become even more fulfilled and even more, for lack of a better word, successful by doing less, by really dropping in my feminine and my creativity and my intuition and my receptivity, and knowing that by really encouraging him to step into his masculine, I wasn't getting demotion.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted the polarity in the relationship, and I wanted sacred union. And I wasn't attracted to beta men. I wasn't attracted to men who led more with their feminine. I was more attracted to masculine men. And so that was an ego death for me. That was a death of an identity of who I was and who I knew myself as. That was the hardest thing for me. The hardest thing with Steph, and we talk about this openly, is when we got together, where I was in my career and finances was very different than when he was. And that's not a dynamic that's as common, right? For the woman to be more successful more and more, but it's something that masculine men have problems with. And it was something I ran into with men that I dated in the past. So I'd often have to try to find people that were more successful, but oftentimes they were a bit narcissistic and there was like no room for me. So I was like, okay, well, where's the balance? And so what he really had to do was like find his masculinity without having it be attached to his accomplishments.
Yes.
Which was huge. So I had to find my femininity without feeling like I was demoting myself or giving away my power. And he had to really step into his masculinity without using accomplishments. So we broke some pretty big patterns and paradigms in that, and now have this beautiful balance of masculine, feminine energy. Yes, we still have our fights. We have our disagreements. He drives me crazy sometimes. I drive him crazy sometimes, but we never really have the same argument twice. We use arguments to grow. We value marriage, not in the conventional institutional way, but the ceremonial agreement of like, you're my growth partner. You're my like ride or die. And this is the commitment until we choose otherwise, you know. There's not like this, like, we're going to be together no matter what happens until we die. But we know in arguments, neither one of us is leaving. Like, we're not going anywhere. And that kind of commitment really helps. And coming into this relationship now versus when I got married in 2006. So Steph and I met in 2018 and like basically got married then, like pretty much right away, legally, but then had a beautiful ceremony a year later. Coming into this relationship with a growth mindset and so much more healed inside myself, I really attracted a partner based on where I was wanting to go versus unresolved issues from where I had been. Because so often we attract partners based on what mom didn't give us, what dad didn't give us, you know, that guy that broke our heart at 16 years old, we're still chasing after that archetype. You know, we attract from our past versus being attracted to someone who shares our future. And that was a really big difference as well.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I was just thinking how that comes back to really living by design versus living by default. And the same way that this shows up in the relationships that we attract into our lives, it comes back also to what we were speaking at the beginning of this episode of doing the work so that we can show up in a clean, service-driven way in our leadership, right? When we haven't done that work, to deal with the daddy issues and the person that cheated on us or the person that left us, broke up with us, the person that bullied us at school, whoever we're still holding some resentment or wounding around, that will show up not only in relationships like you just mentioned, but in our leadership. We'll keep attracting certain situations that will reflect back to us the places where we get to grow and where we get to heal. So it's awesome to really I have fun for myself, and I help a lot of my clients to really do this mindset shift where we see everything that shows up in life, whether it's relationships or in your leadership, in your business, as just that opportunity to see, okay, it's triggering me for a reason. It's showing up in my reality for a reason. It's not bad luck. It's not coincidence. It is an opportunity to see the work that I still get to do.
Yep.
When we can really
get to do, not have to do. That's a great, yeah.
Exactly. So when we can really look at that in that way, there's so much growth that happens. And I find that the suffering lessens a lot as well, because we're no longer in this pity party of why me, why is this happening? But it can almost be a little bit fun. And at times it's really uncomfortable and challenging. But the more we take on the challenge with grace, the more fun it gets, where it's like, oh, little bit of myself that I hadn't seen yet, or something that I get to heal so that I can go into the next level. and it just changes the whole dynamic.
It really does. I mean, Steph and I, we always like laugh about our fights and our arguments, or even now when I have like an expectation hangover come up or a growth opportunity, it's like, all right, here it is. And I may not love it, but there's going to be something juicy on the other side of it. And that's what I see now in my life. Like every disappointment, it helps me grow. Every argument Steph and I have, it helps our relationship get more solid. And when we can, and that's what, after you've, exercise your personal development muscle for a while, you're not so scared of challenge or of conflict or of arguments.
Yes.
And this kind of goes back to like leading from neutrality versus picking a side, because in an argument, for example, when you're attached to being right, forget it. Like you're never going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
But when you realize you're on the same team, you're going to get somewhere. And that's, to me, we can take that to what's happening in the divided states. Used to be the United States, but now it's the divided states, and go, wait a second. We all want a lot of the same things here. We want our country to be, fill in the blank, but because both sides want to be right, we're not getting anywhere. Mm-hmm. And we can look at that in our relationships, or even with ourselves. Like if you, for example, had a launch and it didn't go well, and you want to be right about how you did everything right and it should have gone well, and you're just going to, be upset about it, you're not going to learn. So that ego's desire to be right, we all have it. And the more we can let go of that and really be students of our life and visionaries versus lawyers, then it's like, all right, there's some room to grow here.
Yes, definitely. That's something that actually showed up in my relationship when we first got together. And there's that dance that was happening where all the invisible lawyers would come up. When something would happen, all the invisible lawyers would come up. And I remember we had a conversation many times where it's, if one of us is right, the other one has to lose. There's always one person that has to lose if it's about right and wrong. So it's about really making each other feel safe to be with whatever it's happening, and seeing how, as you say, being in the same team, we can move forward with that.
Yep, absolutely.
There's one concept you mentioned that I love to go a little bit deeper into. You said expectation hangover. And I was just having a conversation with one of my clients, and actually one of my friends as well, last week, on that difference between expectation and standards. How can we understand and really drop into the knowing that nobody owes us anything, take full self-accountability and self-responsibility for the fact that whatever it is that we want, it's up to us, and yet being able to have standards and to have boundaries with the people around us. I feel like it's a fine line where sometimes we think this is my boundary or this is my standard, but actually I'm just expecting someone to give me something that I'm not willing to give myself.
Right.
So let's go into that expectation hangover.
Yeah. So that was the title of my last book, because I wanted to give people a recipe for leveraging disappointment. Not just getting over it, because when you get over disappointment, you just brush it under the rug, and then you have the same kind of disappointment a year later, 5 months later, 5 years later. You're just experiencing the same thing, maybe different cast of characters, but it's the same kind of feeling. And it's impossible to be human and not have expectations. Like we just do. It's like, it's impossible not to have your mind wander sometimes. It's just the nature of being human. But expectations we're back to what we spoke about earlier. They have attachment. So standards are intentions. They're the things that, are your guidelines in life. So, it helps you make decisions. Standards help you make decisions. Yes. It's like, is this in alignment with my standards, with my values? No. So it's a no. It helps me make a decision. I don't need to do pro-con lists. I don't need to talk to my astrologer. I don't need to ruminate about it. It's a no. Mm-hmm. Expectations have this massive attachment to a certain result that we think is going to make us feel a certain way. That's where expectations come from. I expect my husband to know what I want for my birthday. Yes. Like I expect so-and-so to know. I expect myself to fill in the blank. And so there's this attachment to it going a certain way, and it's the attachment that creates down the road the expectation hangover. So expectations are breeding grounds for disappointment, AKA expectation hangovers. And like I said, it's impossible not to have them, but we can mitigate it by having clear-cut values, by forming agreements with people not expectations.
Mm-hmm.
By not going to a Chinese restaurant when we want nachos, meaning if I have a friend who every time I tell her one of my visions or ideas, she's like, meh, I don't think that'll work. And I keep going to her, hoping that one day she'll be like, that's a great idea. I'm constantly going to get disappointed. Instead, I'm going to go to the person that can serve me nachos, who can be like, that's a great idea, Christine, go for it. So we end up with a lot of expectation hangovers because we're going to the wrong people or the wrong tools or the wrong leader for a certain thing. And we need to go, okay, wait, I want nachos. That's clearly a Chinese restaurant. Nothing wrong with a Chinese restaurant. That's just not what I need. I need nachos. So I'm going to go here for that. So learning how we can, avoid disappointment by setting ourselves up with those agreements, with standards, with knowing who we can go to for certain things is massive. And then also knowing when we have an expectation hangover, going straight to what am I learning from it and what does it remind me of versus why did this happen to me? When we're in that, why did this happen to me? I did everything right. This isn't fair. Then we're in that victim mentality. We're too attached to the expectation of the way we thought it should go. And then we're just stuck. We're not moving forward. We're just in that cycle of victimhood.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And it comes back to ownership. It comes back to really seeing all the places and all the ways in which we've given our power away because of that constant outsourcing of what we need and claiming it back, being okay, so this is what I need. And it is my absolute responsibility to take care of that. And the people around me may or may not be able to meet me there. Hence why we communicate and we make agreements like you were saying. And if they not, then I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm going to have another relationship. I'm going to have other friends. I'm going to have other business partners.
Yes.
And I feel like this is one of the things, I mean, there's so many things that we get to change about society, but this is one of the things that I really see would benefit us, every single person in the world so much, really learning to tune back within, to let go of that constant outsourcing of our truth, outsourcing of our needs, outsourcing of our safety, outsourcing of our love, and really learn to pour that within. But it takes a certain level of responsibility and awareness. So in that regards of the expectations, I guess for leaders and entrepreneurs that might not be seeing, and this is going to be, I imagine, a quite simple answer. There's many different indicators for these. Leaders that might not be seeing, they are engaging on those subconscious expectations that they have for the clients, that they have for the followers, that they have for when the timeline of the money coming in or the launch succeeding is showing up. What is something that whoever is listening to this and knowing, oh, this is maybe showing up within my life, what is something that they can look at, ask themselves, or do in order to recognize where the expectations are showing up and how to start turning them around?
Well, my first answer is get a coach or get somebody that can illuminate the blind spots, because we're too close to ourselves, we're too close to our businesses, we're too close to our relationships. And I think if we're leading people, we need a team. Like I just believe that. And when people that want to be mission-driven leaders and entrepreneurs tell me, well, I can't afford a coach, I'm like, you need to, one, look at your scarcity issues, and two, look at your values, because you are your investment. Like, you are your best investment. And if your mind isn't right, your emotions aren't right, and your psyche, subconscious, inner child, your business is going to suffer. So since I'm specifically speaking to your audience, this wouldn't be my answer for everyone, but for this audience, like, get someone that can lead you, and help you with those blind spots. Because, I know for me, without the people in my life who've been able to shine a flashlight and go, Christine, like, look over there. Yeah. I definitely wouldn't be where I am today.
Yeah. 1,000%. I 100% agree. Definitely. And there's two more questions I want to ask you, Christine. The first being, where can people find you, and what are the ways in which people can work with you?
Oh, thank you. So my favorite social media platform is Instagram. It's just Christine Hassler. I'd love for people to come over to the podcast over and On With It. So I've done 270 live, unscripted, unproduced, unedited life coaching, spiritual psychology therapy sessions with people.
Amazing.
And it's every numbered episode, and you can go through and look at the titles, and no matter what episode it is, something will resonate with you. So it will help you understand coaching, help you understand a little bit of psychology, and help you connect some dots. And that, again, is called Over It and On With It. And then if you just go to my website, Christine Hassler, you can get my free coaching assessment.
Amazing. I'm going to leave all of these links in the show notes as well. And lastly, what, in your opinion, makes a leader sacred?
I think that what makes a leader sacred is understanding, first and foremost, that you don't want people behind you. You don't want people following you. You want people that you want to make sure that you are, again, back to what I was saying before, truly inspiring the leader within people. And not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. Not everybody wants to be a leader in terms of being out in front of people. However, everyone has a leader archetype within them. And what makes leadership sacred is when we can really honor the archetype of what leader is and sort of get away from the celebrity, the performance, the power, the more shadow aspects. We have to know that and recognize it and not think that we're above it. Like, I own my shadow aspects of leader, the leader archetype, but I can see them and I recognize them and I call myself out, and I have people that call me out on them. And what makes it sacred is to realize that there is the shadow and the light, to know that we have both inside, to recognize the shadow, but let the light be the thing that really inspires you and really is at the crux of everything that you do as a leader.
Yes, absolutely agree. And I love that. Thank you. Thank you, Christine, for the work that you do. Thank you for making the time to be in the podcast.
My pleasure.
And, yeah, thank you again for all the wisdom that you've shared.
My pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed this video and got lots of value from it. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel for many more value-packed free videos, and share this with anyone in your life who can also get value from it. If you want to get access to all of my free resources and connect, check out the links in the caption. Thank you again, and I will see you on the next video.